Our student was giving attitude. It has to stay in here because I've never told anyone but my family. And she was going to crumble up this letter that my teacher wrote for her. We're transitioning to teaching them about fractions, and I made all these little fraction pieces. So what 1/2 would look like, and then if it turned into 1/12, what 1/3 would look like. But I didn't think about how hard it would be to tape it all up into the whiteboard, so I need to make a bunch of little tapes to prepare.
Are you three ready for this?
Yeah!
You guys got nothing to worry about. With all the speed, with all the speed, here it goes! Oh my goodness, whoa.
During the equivalent fraction lesson, I realized that I spent way too much time preparing for it. I had to cut out all these little pieces and make sure that they were actually even. It did make it more concrete for them, which I think makes it worth it. It is my very last full week of student teaching. I'm here until Wednesday. I can't believe my time is coming to an end soon. These 4 months went by so fast, and the next step is to observe other teachers at this school. It's going to be a very, very busy week. We have the BMX assembly today. I have my last observation for WGU at the end of this week, and a possible observation from the principal for a possible letter of recommendation. There's a whole new chapter of math that we're going to go over. We have testing coming soon. We also got to finish our opinion writing because open house is creeping around the corner. The students didn't get to finish their inferences to fill up this tree. There's also the diagnostic test. So there's a lot of stuff piling up, and it feels like there's not enough time in the day to get all these things done. Oh, look at that teamwork! Science was so fun today. We quickly reviewed how the sun's energy could be used to create heat and electricity. Then we discussed how electricity is formed by looking at the lights in our classroom. A student made a connection that everything's connected through wires, and I connected it back to the wires in the solar plants that we learned about. Then the students got to experiment with electricity and try to light up the light bulb. I always love lessons when they're able to work with each other, and a lot of them had a very productive struggle for about 20 minutes and then started getting it. All the groups would be like, Ms. Trin, we got it. I just love when they're so excited to learn about things, and especially when they're able to work together while doing so. Math was a little funky today. I don't know if it was my teaching or they just weren't focused enough. I'm hoping that they don't struggle too much with homework tonight. We did send them home with a comparison of equivalent fractions, so hopefully they use that as reference. Other than that, it was an amazing day. The day went by really fast too. Now I got a plan for observation 6. I also forgot to mention that during our PLCs, our goal was to increase students' understanding of text structures, so we gave them a pre-test a couple weeks ago. We were supposed to reteach text structures depending on how the students scored. We finally did our post-test today, and I was honestly scared about the students' results because I wasn't sure if we did enough for them. My host teacher went over the pre-test with them very deeply into each question. We were also talking about text structure whenever we were learning about science. I did one reading group with the students who needed additional support, and then my host teacher did 2 reading groups with the one who needed extra support. And with the post-test, they scored so much better than the pre-test, which is great because we won't have to look bad during our next PLC. My host teacher and I were on campus until 6:30 p.m. last night planning for my observation about character change. I already had a general flow of ideas for my lesson, but thank goodness I have an amazing host teacher because she gave me an even better idea. I'm going to invite my principal to come observe this lesson instead of a math one. I think it will really showcase what I'm capable of. I'm going to show you what I have planned, but honestly, I wouldn't have ever thought of this idea if it wasn't for my host teacher. We were working on equivalent fractions again today, and it went so much better than yesterday. We used a fraction bar chart and went over how to use it properly, and so the students were getting it very quickly this time. This is what the fraction bar looks like, but they would put a ruler over one of the fractions and they would easily see that 1/3 is also equal to 2/6 and 4/12. For language arts, I was also modeling how to convert your rough draft into a final draft. We worked together to find extra details for our reasons to expand and make our writing better. Overall, the students are amazing today. It's really only 1 or 2 students who aren't doing their work or are being distracting, but everyone else is doing their best to ignore the distractions. I really wish that I could give them more on-task stickies because they're doing great. It's just it has to be every single student within the class is doing what they're expected wanted to, which unfortunately isn't happening. But I am very appreciative and acknowledging the ones who are doing what they're supposed to be doing by giving table points, and I'm also going to put in some PBIS points for those who are on task. It's so cute too because my opinion writing sample is on whales, so some of them are raising their hands to share some random facts that they knew about whales, but also really helping me add more details to my own writing. And that exchange of information is just so valuable as a learner and a teacher. They really do teach me some things that I wouldn't come up with on my own too. After lunch, the students worked really well on the opinion writing. They were starting to type it up, and every single person in the room was working, which is a rare sight to see. Afterwards, the students had VAPA, and when we came back, one of the teachers was talking about how our student was giving attitude. So we had a whole class discussion about how to treat others, especially the VAPA teachers, and making better decisions with our learning. For science, the students drew a diagram of the light bulb yesterday, and we talked about how energy is transferred from the battery to the light bulb. And then they had to reflect on other instances where they're using a battery, so a phone, Tesla, Xbox. A bunch of their hands were raised. Then at the very end of the day, we just sent them off to do PE. This is what my observation lesson plan for character change is looking like so far. I had to pre-select some quotes because I know my students have a really hard time with shuffling through the pages and trying to find evidence by themselves. I actually watched a video on how to teach character change from this lovely teacher, and I'm going to start off by sharing a bad habit I have, steps I made to change that habit, and the reason why I did, along with the results. Have them think of a habit or a behavior that they changed, then transition them into character change for Winn-Dixie. With the pre-selected quotes, I'm going to print them out and then sort them. So I'm going to model the preacher. After sorting whether those quotes belong to the original preacher or the changed preacher, I'm going to then move on into my double bubble map. So I'm going to move the pieces from the T-chart into this double bubble map. For example, when Winn-Dixie is talking about the preacher's just preaching all day, preaching here, preaching there, versus when he accepts the party invitation to Gloria Dump's party, and then they're going to either assign a character trait or write a description about how the preacher is. So with the preaching, he only makes time for preaching, and then when he accepts the party invitation, it's like, oh, now he's making time for other things. So they'll be able to see that change. And then the middle section are things or character traits that the preacher still maintains about himself. Like he's very respectful, he's kind-hearted, and the last one was that he cares for Winn-Dixie. I'm going to have quotes that show like the original preacher still caring for Winn-Dixie and doing all those things, and then the changed preacher still doing all those things. So they will use that evidence or all the quotes that I'm printing out and come up with things to fill in to these bubbles. The preacher will all be modeling and guided practice, and then independent practice will be the same structure. They're going to do T-chart for opal and then a double bubble for opal. I know that my group of kids would rather work in partners, so I'm going to let that be an option. And they've been doing really well this week with working in teams, so I'm really crossing my fingers that they are good on Thursday. I just had my post-observation conference from observation 5, which was the last observation that I had, and we were also talking about my next lesson plan. And I showed her my graphic organizers, and she said that might not be as effective as I'm hoping it to be, because since character change is like then, now, and then evidence, it might be more effective to show like a flow of things rather than a double bubble map. So now I gotta redo it. Another surprising advice I got was that I am feeding them with a spoon too much. My plan was to do the pre-selected quotes because I know my students would struggle to locate evidence from the book, but I think the standard doesn't need quotes, so as long as the students are describing a certain event in the book, that'll be fine, which I think is doable. It just won't be as specific as the standard needs it to be. But yeah, I was really surprised about that advice because during my last observation, they struggled a lot to do independent work, and I said that I thought I would need to model it more or guide them through it more. But during observation 4, which was about text structures, I didn't guide them through it enough, so they were very lost on how to do independent practice. Now I'm sitting here very confused about whether or not I'm doing too much for them or not doing enough for them. This graphic organizer is taking a little longer than I thought to set up, but this is what it looks like now. It's talking about the character in the beginning and the reason why they changed. And then on the back side, it'll talk about the same things that the character still keeps about themselves with evidence from the beginning and the end. And I don't want to overload them with work, so I'm just going to have them do 2 instead of 3 for the same characteristics because we're talking about character change. At the end, I'll just let them draw a picture of what that change looks like. My host teacher kind of disagrees with what my supervisor said about the graphic organizer because a double bubble map is meant to compare and contrast 2 different ideas. And even though we're comparing the same character, the character at the beginning of the story or the original character is different from the character that they turn into at the end of the story. I don't know. I'm just going to stick with this one just because that's what my supervisor and I talked about last night. And if the principal really does come and observe, I'll just ask her too which organizer would be best suited for this type of lesson. I just finished 12 and a half hours at school today. Today was a pretty different day for me because, I almost fell. But one of the teachers in 3rd grade invited me over to watch her writing lesson. And the process that she makes the students go through is pretty intense because they have to create like a rough draft with their flow map. So their opinion writing prompt was, what would be the best place for a field trip? So she has a graphic organizer where the students write the place that they chose along with 5 reasons why that place would be a good place to go. Then she goes really deep into modeling how to change and revise their ideas and does that with about 5 students, and everyone else is just sitting and listening to what is expected. After they have 5 solid reasons for why they chose that place, they circle 3 of them that they want to write about. What was really interesting to me was she has them write their paragraph, like introduction, on a whiteboard, and she edits every single student's paragraph before they can transfer that into the flow map. I really love observing other teachers because everyone takes on tasks so differently and you just learn so much even just being in that atmosphere. Something that was really funny is that I left my classroom without saying anything. Well, my host teacher knew, but the kids didn't know. She told the students that I was in the other class, and then every time my students went to the restroom, I could see them peeking through the window and trying to find me, like near the teacher's desk, but I was on the other side. A bunch of them wanted to go to the restroom, so I'd just see pairs of them walking really close to the window and like looking for me. Eventually, I came back to my own classroom because I wanted to finish off winn-dixie, and when I walked back in, the reaction was so adorable. Hello! After school, we had a district grade level staff meeting and we were sharing ideas about what we're going to do for open house. I honestly didn't talk at all during that meeting, but it was really interesting to see and hear what other teachers are doing in their classroom. One thing that really stood out was that one teacher from a different school made these little cubes where each group would focus on one Native American tribe, then present it to the entire class while the others would take note.
Did you give the little cards back to me when I lost them?
After the meeting, my host teacher and I went back to campus to set up for tomorrow and prepare for my lesson plan. And this is what the final draft of my graphic organizer is looking like. There's one for Opal and then one for the preacher. This is the one that I'm going to model, and I always prepare the sticky notes ahead of time with the answers because I know that if I'm spending time during the lesson to write it out, that's just a chance for them to get bored and distracted. So I'm going to model 2 of them and then guide them through one, and then on the back side it'll be talking about things that remain the same, so he's still respectful throughout the book. And after they finished all of it, they can create a picture of the character change before and after. So the preacher will all be for modeling and guided practice, and then they're going to work on Opal for independent practice, and I'm going to let them choose whether or not they want to work alone or in pairs. They've been doing really well with working in pairs this whole week, and I'm hoping I don't jinx it, but if they are getting distracted, I'll just send them back to their seats to have to work, and that usually whips them back into shape. Also, one memory before I ever forget this is that there's this little boy. He's so cute because he's super imaginative. When he realized that I was leaving very, very soon, I was helping him with his writing, and he just said, "I'm really going to miss you." The observation invitation to my principal is officially sent. I'm feeling extremely good this morning and I have a lot of energy. Hopefully this doesn't die down within the next hour. My lesson went really well. I would say it's the best ELA lesson that I've ever given. And I'd say I was a lot more myself than every other observation that I had. Usually when I'm recording, I get like a little more tight and I'm less expressive when I'm teaching. But this time I was just able to be myself. I started off the lesson by telling them a change that I had to make. And then I told them, but it has to stay in here because I've never told anyone but my family. I used to be insanely addicted to this game on my phone, and it took me 10 years to get out of that habit and to just quit and sell my account. So they were asking about which game it was, and I said that if they are on task and focused, I will share with them, but they still can't tell anybody. After the lesson, they did a really good job and I gave them an on-task sticky, and a lot of the boys were coming up to me and asking me if I was going to tell them because that's what I said. Some of them were also in the restroom and came back and was like, "Did she tell you the game already?" So now I'm a little scared for them to come back from lunch because I've never said the name of this game to anyone but my family. Also, during math this morning, they were amazing. We were working with comparing fractions and it does get very tricky, but they were focused, they were attentive, and a lot of this focus is probably because we only have 17 out of 25 kids that are present today since it is a super rainy day. So I guess a lot of their families decided to stay home. My principal also couldn't come and watch the observation, so she said that she'll watch the recording of it. We got like pizza slices over here. Let me see here. This is so funny.
Is it right?
I don't know. You have to try it and see. Look at how fast they're getting through it. I am driving, but I will focus on the road while updating about my day. After school, there were parent-teacher conferences, and one of the moms of the student that's super attached to me, she found out that I was going to leave next week. And then she mentioned that the student talks about me a lot when he goes home. She was talking about this penguin bookmark that I made him and he was showing off to her. He was showing her this drawing that I made for him during Christmas time when we were drawing Art for Kids Hub on paper bags. And I found out that he has this little sentimental box of all things that he keeps to himself, and he gets super upset if anyone ever goes through it. So my heart was just melting when I found out about that. Like, as an adult, it means so much when people value the things that you give them, and knowing that a little kid is doing that and using that as a memory of you, it just makes me so happy to know. Because even today there was another student in class who was getting rid of some papers in her folder, and she was going to crumble up this letter that my teacher wrote for her as a thank you. So I was just thinking when I saw her almost crumble it up, that if I were to give a goodbye letter, which I'm planning to do, I feel like most of the kids might throw it away. But I'm going to do it anyways, and then hope that those little kids that have those memory boxes will keep them forever. I know for myself that these are kids that I will never forget. Also, when I heard that the kid that's attached to me has that memory box, it made me think back to this time that there was another boy in the class who dropped all his papers, and I was helping him pick it up, and I saw this card that I wrote to each student for giving me a Christmas gift. And then I was thinking to myself, like, wait a second, this kid wasn't one of them that got a thank you card for Christmas. And so I remembered the washi tape, because each student got a different washi tape that was decorated around the card, and that card belonged to the student who has the memory box. Sorry if this doesn't make sense because I just talked about 3 students, but now that I know that the memory box kid has a memory box, it's so odd to me that this other kid would have his Christmas card. And the kid who has it right now, when I saw it, I was like, "Oh, you kept it." And then he said, "Yeah." I was going to put it in the front of his homework folder, but I asked if he wanted it in the back, and he said he wanted it in the back. And he wrote his own name onto the card that belonged to the other kid with the memory box. It's a little odd to me of the chances that the memory box kid would give a card to someone else. So that's something that I'm going to investigate tomorrow. But anyways, Learning about that memory box made me really happy because when I give them their gifts, I just imagine that kid keeping it in his box forever. One more thing, my teacher gave me this book because she had 2 copies of it, and she's honestly adding to my library because I have no books besides the one that she gave me and a few that I got the recent Christmas. I was just never really a reader growing up, and even now, so it's nice to get recommended some books. If you know any good ones that students love, like all grade levels, please comment that below so I can check it out. It was a student's birthday yesterday and she wasn't here, but she came back and gave me this. It's so cute. It's like a little Lego plant, and it's perfect because the mushroom pot that my teacher gave me when I first came dropped and broke. Luckily the base of it broke, so I kept the top where the mushroom is. I'll show you in a bit, but this is so adorable. This is what's left of the mushroom pot, but she also gave me this tiny boba keychain, and now I have this Lego plant. A lot of the students easily understood math, but they were so dead during my lesson. There's 2 students in my class who are becoming very dependent on just coming to the carpet and getting guided through the independent practice. When we go through it together, they know how to do it, but it's that mental block, and I'm trying to fade that out. I regret giving the kids PE before science because they couldn't pull themselves together for quite some time. When we finally got to science, it went well. The students got to test their windmills and fix it and then come back to retry it again. With that whole Christmas card situation, the student who had it said that he didn't know how he ended up with it. And I tried to take it slowly, like, well, I wrote this card, but I didn't write your name there because that's not my writing. And then he said another student gave it to him, but he couldn't recall who that student was. So I was thinking maybe the student who I wrote it to just gave it to him because he didn't care for it. So I went to the student who it belongs to and pulled it out and said, "Does this look familiar to you?" And that kid reacted like he has never seen it in his life. And I told him, I wrote this for you for Christmas, which was 2 months ago. He never got that card because I left it on his desk in the middle for him to come into. Eventually I pulled the other boy outside. I erased the name that was crossed off. I said, "Hey, this card belongs to blah blah blah." And he's like, "Oh, it is, but that's not my writing." Like, it had his name, and then he said, "That's not my writing because I write my Z's like this and I write my A's like this." And so I just gave him the benefit of the doubt. So it's either some other kid took it from his desk, cross out his name, write the other boy's name to get him in trouble, or he's just straight up lying to me. I don't know what it is, but the card is finally with the boy that it belongs to, and I told him to take it home, so deal's done. I was helping the student that's attached to me with his opinion writing, and he's not a big fan of language arts, but after lunch he asked, "Oh, are we doing opinion writing?" And then I said, "Probably not." And then he said, "Oh, I kind of wanted to do it." And so I told my host teacher that because that's such a rare thing to hear. And then she said, "He just wants to sit next to you and do his work." After school, I was walking another student out to the gate to see if his grandma was picking him up, and another student starts running towards me. He's like, "Miss Trin, Miss Trin, Miss Trin." And he wasn't supposed to leave the area near the classroom. And when he got to me, he stood there like he was waiting for something. I was like, "Hi." I lifted my arm up. He gave me a hug and then just walked back. This is a touch-free school, so I always feel a little weird initiating it, but I felt like that's what he wanted. I just got my observation evaluation back from my clinical supervisor, you know, like the ILPs, and I got a perfect score on the recent observation. This is the first time I got a high score on the language arts. With every language arts observation I've had, there was always something that I did that just wasn't right, but this time I got 3s all across the board. Yay! I'm making this as a goodbye gift to my host teacher, and I was inspired by this picture, but then I'm replacing the cats with sock monkeys instead because when she was a child, she used to be obsessed and have hundreds of sock monkeys just lined up on her bedroom. The sketch turned out a lot cuter than I expected, and it saves me so much money because I don't make any money as a student teacher.